Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the data types in JavaScript. Understanding this concept is very essential as data types are the building blocks for all our JavaScript code. So with this, let's get started now. Basically, we have two different data types in JavaScript. They are primitives and objects. Primitives are the data which are not an object. Hence, it is a single value and don't have any properties and methods like objects. In JavaScript, there are 7 primitives. They are string, number, big int, boolean, undefined, symbol, and null. Objects, on the other hand, are the data that has properties and methods, and mainly they can store multiple values in them. So everything except primitives are objects. Some of the examples are arrays, functions, object literals, maps, hash tables, and many more. With all this information, let's now point out the key differences between them with some examples. Primitives, as they are single value, their value cannot be changed by any means or ways. We could possibly reassign a variable with a different primitive like a string, number, boolean, etc. But we cannot change the actual value of the primitive itself. I hope it makes some sense. While objects can be changed by adding, deleting, or modifying its properties and methods. That's simple. So with this, let's look into some examples now. In the first diagram, we have got an immutable primitive. Here the immutable just means the value is unchangeable. So for this, we have defined a variable named stringCheck and assigned its value to a string called hello, right? Then on the second line, we are trying to modify the letter of hello, which is H, and it's the first letter with the letter Y. And as we log this into the console, we get the original value without any change in it. Hence, we can conclude that the primitive, which is a string, in this case is immutable, which means it cannot be changed. In the other diagram, we have defined an object with name and surname as properties. And in the second line, we tried to change the value of name property to Ron. And as we log this into the console, we get the object with the different value of name. This proves that the objects are mutable, which means their values can be changed by accessing their properties. Next, the second significant difference is that the primitives are passed and copied by value, while the objects are passed and copied by reference. So what do we actually mean by this? Let's find out through our example. Well, in this example, we have defined two variables, string1 and string2, and they are being assigned hello and world respectively. The diagram below, they represent what's actually happening behind the scenes when we write our code. Alright, so we have also got the identifiers here, which basically represents the variable name, and we have got memory that stores the value of the variable. Each value will have different address in the memory. And here we can see that string1 and string2 pointers being set to different address with value hello and world. Alright. Then on the third line of our code, we assigned string2 to string1 variable. Doing this will make the pointer of string1 point towards the value of string2. We are now already seeing that the values are being passed around. Furthermore, in line 4, we reassign the value of string2 to earth. Now what happens is that a new memory address will be created with the value earth, and the pointer of string2 will now point towards the new address in the memory. So what happens now is the value of string2 is earth, which is a new value, but the value of string1 is still world, as its pointer is still pointing at the same address as before. And to justify this, we can also see the result when we log their values into the console. But for objects, it's a different case. The data is actually stored in a heap, or we can call it a memory heap, and the reference we see in the diagram below is the copy of data inside that particular memory heap, right? It might be a bit confusing to understand this, but hopefully you'll get there soon. So in line 1 of our code, when we create a variable object1 and set its properties, those properties will be stored inside the memory heap with their values. But the object1 will not directly point towards the heap. Rather, it will point to the reference which is in between, and that reference will act as a copy of the heap, right? So precisely we can say that the variable points at the reference, and it is the reference that points at the address in the heap. Now in second line of our code, we assign object1 to a new variable called object2. So what happens here behind the scene is that the object2 will also now point at the same reference to which the object1 was pointing at, since now they are equal. Easy, right? Now, in the third line, when we change the value of name property for object2, the change will also occur in object1. This will happen because both object1 and object2 are pointing at the same reference, and since the change of property value happened in object2, this change will also reflect in object1, which is pointing at the same reference. Hence now we have a proof that objects are passed by reference. Now moving on to the final difference, as we mentioned earlier in the definition, is that primitives are single value and it lacks properties and methods, while the objects, they do have properties and methods. Well, semantically that's true from definition, but practically we can apply properties and methods for primitives with the help of the temporary special object wrapper which JavaScript engine provides us behind the scene, and we will be looking into this concept in our example. Firstly, I would like to show you this example where we have used length property and methods such as indexOf in our string to do some sort of calculation. Now, of course, the first question that will come to our mind is that how is it even possible to call methods and properties in a string, as a string is a primitive, right? Well, the answer to this would be that the JavaScript engine that's behind the scene wraps all our primitives with the special object wrapper during the creation time. Like for in this example, when we created a string called hello world, what JavaScript does here is it wraps that primitives using the code new string that passes the hello world inside the parameters. The new string acts as our object wrapper here. The object wrapper is temporary and it's mainly used to allow the primitives such as string to get access to different properties and methods, as it will be really impossible to do without this step. Then once the desired calculation is performed, the object wrapper will immediately be destroyed and sent to the garbage collector. Now we will be remained with only the calculated primitive value, and this step repeats on and on and on for every calculation we need to perform on any primitives we have. Alright, that's it for the lecture. Now to recall all the key moments, let's now summarize everything we have learned so far about the data types. To begin with, JavaScript has two different data types. They are primitives and objects. The primitives, they don't have their own properties and methods, while the objects, they do have their own properties and methods. To mention some of the most used primitives, they are string, number, and boolean, while objects, being anything other than primitives, are basically arrays, functions, object literals, as they can store multiple values inside them. Now, the value of primitives can never be changed, while the objects can be changed or modified according to your wish. So, most importantly, the primitives are passed by value while objects are passed by reference. This is a very key thing to note in here. If you have no idea about what I'm saying here, please go back to the lecture and have a look at the value versus reference types. As primitives don't have their own properties and methods, JavaScript engine provides a special object wrapper for all the primitives we define to make them have access to different properties and methods to perform some sort of calculations, right? Okay, great. That's it for now. Thank you very much, guys, and I hope now you have got a strong understanding of the data types in JavaScript. Any questions, please comment down below, and I will see you in the next lecture.